All right, welcome to this first video. I'm going to show you everything that we've learned running Pace Morby's Gator method webinar. This is an offer that Eddie and I, along with a part of the bad team, took from $0 genuine, nothing collected, all the way up to $39 million in cash collected over the course of about a year and a half. And so super fun to work on this offer. Pace is just a killer on screen. You can see this is us planning for them. This is a video that they did together talking about some of the things that we were doing with them and the New Reach group. And so I figured to share everything that we learned kind of running this offer, considering most of it was actually evergreen webinar. So a little bit to take away from this. But before we jump into this, I figured to give you a bit of an intro. I've been in digital marketing space really prior to this, probably about 2014. I ran a handful of micro agencies serving Snapchat filter, events, car dealerships, e-com stores, and then finally linking up with Eddie and joining Bad Marketing, or at least what was For Media, back in 2022. Ever since then, we've worked with a large queue of clients, some of the biggest and most well-known names in the space. And at least my job specifically is building out all the offers specifically related around challenges, webinars, and really everything between. And so really one of our largest case studies was actually Pace here. But let's dive in. So kind of diving into the first part here. I'm not great at making these videos unprompted, and so this is how I laid it out. If you aren't familiar with Pace and the Gator method, this was one of the offers that he had launched, or at least one of the real estate via avatars that at least we got assigned outside of Sub2. Sub2 is one of Pace's primary offer. So we got this offer just because it was something that they had our time scaling. They tried to do a couple warm internal launches, didn't go so hot. And so we kind of pretty much got it with a clean slate. They virtually did nothing cash collected, and they wanted us to kind of give it a shot. So Pace is a handful of different ways that you can make money in real estate. I think if you look at some of his content now, he'll kind of show you his avatar guide. He'll talk a little bit about I think it's like upwards of 22 functions of real estate now at this point, and all the different avatars that at least go within that. But this Gator method was primarily designed around earnest money JV, which is giving money to investors who ran out of money on their deals, and really focusing on the beginner mindset, which was partnering with other people's deal without your own money, finding your own property, or really participating in it. And so it was very much on the outside. You were perceived as a money man, but the way Pace actually structured it was you weren't using any of your own money. And so because of the way he structured this method and all the real estate logistics in between, we were able to position this as the old beginner real estate investment method and really throw a lot of rocks at wholesaling and everything in between. Pace is just a category king and was able to kind of really squash anything in between. So a 2K offer, pay in full. We did a split pay of $16.97 with a 2Pay. So I'll show you guys a bit of the webinar structure here. As far as traffic sources go, a lot of this you guys will realize is pretty straightforward. There's probably not a ton of mind-blowing information in this part. I think one of the biggest takeaways from all of this is that Pace is just a beast on camera. And when I kind of show you guys into the webinar outline, you may get to pick up on some of that. So we pretty much split up our warm traffic. Pace is a very large community, both on Instagram, YouTube, the Facebook group, both free and paid. His Sub2 community, there's a bunch of different pockets that Pace owns. And so when we first launched this offer, we hit up all of those guys again and push that traffic in. But believe it or not, majority of the traffic for some of that first launch and all of the runs after that was my majority cold traffic. So typical spots: Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, right? And lots of Google retargeting, everything between. The registration page, pretty straightforward, right? We did a couple different testings of different headline concepts and everything between, right? But most of it came down to just this play of piggybacking off of other people's deals, using other people's money, and that it was super safe and super easy. So this was primarily, I think it was early 2022, 2023 that we were pushing this. And so real estate was becoming a bigger opportunity. The market was blowing up. Everybody's making money. And so we were able to kind of piggyback off of this. And for people who are looking to a way to participate in all of that newfound demand in the market, this kind of fit right in that spot. So pretty straightforward sequence here. We didn't have a bump after the registration. So it was just straight to a thank you page. And again, we just kind of at least littered that thank you page with just tons of evidence as to why this was the newest big opportunity kind of in the space. Lots of what we like, at least what I like to call like natural external urgency. Outside of the entire PACE ecosystem, just taking this concept and this vehicle of making money in the real estate, looking at it against the news and at least what the general community is doing, there was a lot of movement going on, and we kind of anchored on everything that was happening outside of the PACE ecosystem and kind of showed that he was just kind of following along. So show sequence, pretty straightforward, nothing terribly surprising in here. We did a weekly Saturday webinar. Emails went out pretty regularly daily up until the day of, and the day of it, we had at least 3 emails go out along with a pretty comprehensive SMS sequence. And then even towards the end, we were testing some stuff where we were sending out a handful of SMS series upwards of 20 minutes after the webinar actually started. So, Pace had a lot of good points early in the outline here. And so we were kind of taking some of these things and texting them and be like, you won't believe what Pace just said. All this fun stuff to kind of get them onto the call. And so that was a nice bump for us, doing the post live, or at least post SMSs out. So at least for our live webinar, we ran everything on Zoom. We had a handful of moderators in the chat, including myself. And we let Pace drive the comments. That was probably like another big takeaway, was how heavily he relied on the comments, or at least drove based on their objections and sentiment and kind of what they were saying at the moment. And so he was super great about grabbing those objections as soon as they came in and repositioning where he was within those slides and within the presentation to kind of answer that objection and push everybody through. So once we got the first live down, and we did, I believe it was about our second live, we did that purposeful for the Evergreen recording. And then we ran it on EverWebinar. When we ran on EverWebinar, even though it was recorded, we still had a live moderator in the chat kind of answering those things and driving. Pace was pretty good about not making any date references, or at least anything that was kind of timely. And at least being more so generic in the chat, kind of answering some of those things. We also took some of those key points from the live chat, we copied that over and loaded it into EverWebinar. And so some of those instances where we felt like we just needed to address somebody in the chat, or at least an objection from the chat, really kind of push the presentation forward, we added that in as a forced chat and made that work there. So checkout page, again, even if I showed you guys this page, you probably wouldn't think it was anything special. Pretty standard checkout page with a pay in full and a split pay option. No order bump, believe it or not. As far as the OTO go, our OTO offer here was what we call limitless lead flow. And so part of Gator, one of the functions to actually get started is to do your own prospecting, at least go out and find the deals. And so in most OTO offers, making things faster, easier, quicker, more likely, this was one of the factors there. And that if you purchased this you would get all of Pace's prospecting out, including the one that was best performing for these types of Gator deals. And so provided you purchase this, you can pretty much shortcut the entire first chapter, or at least pillar, and get your lead prospecting system set up right away. So believe it or not, the take rate on this wasn't any lower than 30%. And for most of the time we were seeing anywhere between a 40 and 50% take on this offer, which is pretty crazy. It was pretty long form, no VSL, no nothing on there, but just long form sales copy, and just heavy urgency for a long time. This was something that you couldn't buy anywhere else other than this offer. And so I think that kind of contributed to at least why the take rate was as high as it was, because it wasn't anything like special or at least amazing from a marketer's perspective, but at least the way we positioned it and the timeliness and the scarcity just kind of all added up. Plus Pace is just a machine. You'll hear me say that a lot. So he kind of alluded to this on the webinar, that they may get an opportunity to participate in this. And if they do see it, they should take it. And sure enough, it was on the OTO page. So that's at least the offer structure there. Let's see what else we want to talk about. The thank you page on onboarding, at least upon purchasing, right? Pretty straightforward. Lots of thanks, hooray, surprises, all that fun stuff. Lots of app on messages, making sure they were getting into the community and everything in between. One thing that was interesting here is that Pace is partnered with Steve Howard or Prime Corporate Services, sorry. And every student was able to get on an onboarding call with PCS and get their LLC set up for free. Now, sure enough, PCS had a handful of upsells within here that got the business structure and entity and tax protection, all that other fun stuff. And so the beginners were able to get a free LLC set up. And for people that had a more advanced business structure, or at least were more, already into the doing business one way or another, the PCS rep was able to kind of restructure some things and at least give them some like tax and asset protection while participating in this. And then finally, the Discord invite. So again, nothing special within this file. I'm just kind of pushing everybody through. So the non-buyer nurture, we pushed our replay for about 72 hours, and pushing them right into the every webinar experience. So it wasn't like a Zoom replay. We didn't have it on like a fixed page. It was like a genuine new event. And then from there, our entire email sequence was pretty much based around our entire, all of our list of most common objections. We took them out of the Zoom chat. We took them out of email replies, from coaching calls, everything that the PACE team was able to give us. We wrote about a 12 email objection stack here that at least addressed every single thing, and either link them to a piece of content where PACE addressed Gator and that objection, and or a free asset that actually helped them overcome that. So email, very standard performance from this. I would say still nothing terribly tactical that came from this. Towards the later end of our relationship, we ended up adding in the phone team. So we brought in initially the guys from Gray Area Sales, and then the New Reach team took this in-house. And from there, we were upselling people into limitless lead flow if they did not take it. But most of the deals were actually pushed into Sub 2, which was Pace's primary offer, or Gator Elite, which was a higher ticket offer that we created, probably about 3 or 4 months after launching Gator. And so just a more intimate community, because the Gator community itself was upwards of 3,000 to 4,000 people at one point. And so it's pretty easy to get lost in the mix. The cohorts were quite large. There was lots of coaches and everybody got support. But it was not as private and intimate as some people wanted. And that's where we kind of put the Gator Elite system in place. So one kind of note about this and why there's actually 2 offers, and this was actually a point of conflict, with us and the Sub 2 team at one point. And it wasn't really until Pace kind of built the avatar guide that we were able to kind of clean up this experience, because there was a lot of kind of confusion as to what do you pursue, right? Sub 2 is a 10K offer, right? All these great benefits, make money in real estate, right? Like virtually identical. Whereas Gator was that much less of a purchase price. And so there's a lot of people that were like, I just paid all this money and now you have something that's considerably cheaper and it's supposed to be easier, whatever. And so some people got unsettled. It wasn't until Pace wrote the avatar guide and kind of published like what we'd consider like a real estate Bible, as essentially, if you self-identify in this way, this is how you should act within this vertical. And so because Pace is category king and at least claimed that spot, we felt it was up to him to kind of dictate what, based on your personal strengths and criteria and goals, what you want in real estate, he should be the one to determine what game you should play. Because if you're familiar with any sort of real estate biz op, there's like 19 different things you could do to make money in real estate, between wholesaling and flipping and burr and fix and flip, whatever, like multifamily, all these different things. And everybody's kind of being told the same thing. It's like great for beginners. Everybody could do it. You can make a ton of money, all this great stuff. Yet nobody knew kind of like what was right for me. And so this is us adding a level of personalization into this. I'll probably make another couple of videos later on about how we started introducing like some quiz funnel logic and at least really hammer down on the avatar to kind of add some clarity into the ascension process that Pace had within its ecosystem. But long story short, what that avatar guide was able to do was allow us to both in our content, have our sales reps and everything in between point at that guide and basically be like, you told me that you were introverted, you're really good at securing deals, and you're the money person in most of your relationships, right? Because of that, you should go towards Gator Elite, right? You told me you struggle with this. All of the reasons why you struggled in the past is because you just weren't playing towards your avatar, right? You should, everything that went wrong before will go right now because it's now more fit for you. Whereas the more sub 2 persona was somebody that was maybe more boots on the ground, more familiar with the actual real estate logistics, or at least the arbitrage of finding deals, adding bedrooms, the fix and flip aspect, right? The actual renovation portion. And so anybody that kind of identified as a trade, or at least guy coming from the trades or within the real estate community, as maybe a contractor or anything between, and wanted to get into real estate, we kind of pushed them into sub 2, where they knew they'd be more privy to at least the function of that, which was the actual fix and flip arbitrage. So that's kind of how at least we structured that offer, and kind of push everybody accordingly. Also to note is that none of the revenue that's indicated here is for any of these offers. And so all of this revenue here was actually just for Gator and Limitless Lead Flow. And I can at least make another video at some point talking about the back-end sales process there. But that's pretty much it for at least the offer outline. We can kind of start to talk about what the funnel looked like. So again, pretty straightforward. I don't know if you guys are going to take away a ton away from this, but traffic into a single registration page. We regularly split tested stuff, and it was primarily just headlines. But if you saw the page, it was pretty short form, just hero opt-in with, I think, like one lower body. And we occasionally test webinar bullets with testimonials. Didn't see like any significant difference there. Primarily our conversion rate was actually driven by the creatives that we were running. So from there, pretty standard sequence, us an email starting on that Wednesday, and then getting them ready into the webinar show. So daily email and SMS up until that Saturday. Webinar was Saturday at noon. And then again, showing them, hitting them with email and SMS. One thing that isn't illustrated on here, like I mentioned earlier, was the post live messages. That was SMS only. And we would drop upwards of 3 kind of timeliness, where it was like 2 minutes after Pace is live, right? The room is almost getting full. All this fun stuff you're going to miss out, to about 8 minutes in. It's like, you won't believe what Pace just said about real estate. Like he's going to crush some major false belief, something like kind of controversial. And then towards like the 12 to 15 minutes in, it's more of like, he just shared a secret. I've never heard this before. Like, you should probably come take a look. So these text messages did really well. If you're wondering kind of like what the positioning here, what Pace actually didn't, or none of the emails came from Pace. These were all from various team members and people within the Pace community. And so it allows us to kind of keep that positioning away from Pace, where he's just the main guy, and gave us a bit of what I like to believe, just some level of authenticity, where you're kind of communicating more with the people kind of driving the event behind the scenes. We had a lot of people reply to some of these emails, feeling guilty that they couldn't come, and just looking for other ways to participate if they did miss it. And that gave us a great opportunity for some of these sales reps to come in and kind of push them accordingly, just because they knew that they weren't probably going to talk to Pace, and then anybody contacting from the community was just better than anything they were else going to get. So from there, within Zoom, we had a handful of automations that set up that at least triggered these actions after the fact. And so anybody that missed the webinar and didn't attend, obviously just push them straight into the replay. I don't even want to try to push them into anything else, at least until I know that they actually consumed that outbound attempt and denied it. It isn't until after that I would actually try to push them into a booked call experience, or just a different vehicle of consuming the offer that is not privy to kind of sit down and watch this webinar. People that attended but left early, again, depending on where they left, I would either push them into a replay or push them into the non-buyer, at least the checkout urgency experience. So 3 emails Saturday, and then 2 on Sunday that were closing the replay. And then again, if they still did nothing after this, pushing them into a booked call deal, where we had a VSL retargeting funnel that we were running, and basically mentioning that, hey, you participated, right? You saw the offer in some capacity. Like, if you have any more questions, jump on with the rep, and they'll kind of work you through a personalized solution set. So that worked pretty well to kind of support the non-converts in this instance. So primary sequence here was really people who saw and didn't buy. Could probably get the copywriter that wrote this to speak to this a little bit more, but definitely handling all of the objections that typically come within this. And then again, just because of the timeliness of the market and where real estate was at, there was a lot of natural urgency within here where I'm just like, we grabbed a lot of headlines where like the market is changing. If you're in any of these markets, it may already be too late for you. And just all these external signals that would imply that even outside of Gator, that everything was moving super quickly, and that provided you positioned yourself in the right place at the right time, it was almost impossible not to make money. And that Gator was the vehicle to do that. So pushed them into that, and then would drop them back into a email retargeting specific checkout page so we could actually track purchases on that specific checkout. And on that checkout page, at one point we were testing as well, doing a short form sales letter above the checkout. And so kind of could just resell them through, make sure they understood the offer, more feature benefit split there, and then push them into the checkout. So that worked quite well. We split tested both of those towards the end. And I think we saw like a slight conversion increase on that final checkout instance, but even then, not enough to say that it's like something that you should or shouldn't do. So, what most of you are probably looking for is, what did Pace say in this webinar? So, I encourage you to try to watch any sort of Pace live experience because he's arguably like one of the best. And out of all the people that I've seen on webinars, there's kind of like one common trait that I've noticed across a lot of guys that do really well. And it's because it's a confined experience, right? This whole webinar is maybe an hour and a half tops, is that it's church. It's a religious experience. And so these people come in non-believers and they leave as believers in the highest faith, right? And so part of that is Pace comes from a very religious background, and his experience speaking with all these people and at least seeing true religious preacher in the mix. And so it was very much that energy where it felt like he was kind of talking right at you, and tough to explain, but he had it dialed in. So as you can probably imagine, right, when he started this, or at least he would open up with just a warm up and just kind of like a icebreaker, right? So he would kind of always start with some sort of grab and get the audience to just participate heavily. Like, what are they thankful for? Right? Thankful for being here and their house over their head, the food, all this fun stuff. So really just to kind of lower their guard. And this guy's just happy that you're here and grateful for life, and kind of shake off some of the guru energy. So once we kind of get through that, Pace was really good about pivoting into like, you're all thankful for all of that fun stuff. Let me show you how we can take that even exponentially further and use this new secret opportunity, right? Most of these webinars are a new opportunity, new, and crushing false beliefs. And so that was a big primary angle behind that. And again, urgency was a big component here. And that even though, we always want to say that like it works in any market cycle, is that now is the best market cycle it works into. You don't want to wait for the next one because you have all these other, issues to kind of work through. And that if you actually wanted to get started, if you got started now, is that this is the easiest time to get started now. So as you can imagine, because this was primarily beginner focused, we spent a lot of time highlighting what this is not, and making sure that we at least detached ourselves away from all the traditional biz ops, right? Wholesaling, NFTs were big at the time. A lot of people are getting into Airbnb, and then slowly started to drift ourselves, or at least niche ourselves down into real estate, and then specifically stuff related around fix and flip. And so we want to make sure we tackled all the things that it was not. And this was really just because we knew a lot of people were already participating in these things, or at least had purchased anything from a low ticket offer around one of these to they've been through the third course on Airbnbs and are just looking for the next thing. So kind of back to original note here. Pace, when I mentioned Pace is really good about driving the chat and that you should watch these, you'll see, especially around parts like this, where somebody would comment something like, Airbnbs are just the worst. I got stood up with one, or at least I started one, and I had the worst time. And Pace the comments are just ripping, right? And Pace would highlight just that comment and be like, Marianne, like, I hear you exactly, right? I know exactly the pain point you're going through. Airbnbs are pain in the ass because this, and this, and this. You probably experienced that, right? Anyone else have like an Airbnb issue? And he would always take an objection or experience, right? See them completely, right? At least address all the things that they were seeing, plus some expand upon that, and then ask the audience to at least participate or engage if they thought those same things. And so, really great way to rally the chat. And if you're talking about making like extracting the full benefit of being live and doing a presentation live, there's nothing more that you should do than drive the chat specifically. That's where everybody's at least obviously voicing their opinions. So take that, use it, and use it against them. So, he went through this whole big, like, what is not, right? You're here for a reason. You probably experienced one of these things, right? These are all the big issues, right? Now, this is where he kind of alluded to his portion of the vehicle, right? Where it's related around fix and flip, right? But you probably experienced that. And as you can probably imagine, these are really hard to do, right? And all the little micro objections that come with this, right? And again, chat's going nuts. I found a deal one time, but it fell through. And then, or I tried to raise cash and they told me I couldn't do it. Or I did a flip and I ended up losing money after taxes or whatever, all of these things. And Pace is just eating it up. And it's like, I hear you. This all happened to me. And I'm going to show you exactly how I fixed all of it. I was the one person that participated through it. So pretty typical, right? Ask for focus, nothing too crazy there. The who am I, right? Pace, obviously being the powerhouse that he is, made sure to really hammer down on all of this, that he's been through the entire mix and has an insane amount of real estate and has helped an absurd amount of people, right? But this is where he really gets into his stride, is his backstory, right? A lot of people are going to raise red flags as to, why are you doing this? If you're so good at this, why are you doing this? And that, more than likely you came from some rich family or somebody who taught you to do this, or you were placed in this spot. But Pace was really great at being like, no, my dad was a contractor. I, like most contracting, or at least people in a blue collar family, ended up coming up under that. And, on the weekends and at nights, hammering nails, doing the thing. He was a, definitely positioning avatar. Pace was the guy. I was a blue collar guy. If your boots are muddy, you're wearing a helmet, right? Your clothes are dirty every day. I feel you, because that was me for the first 20 years of my life, right? However long Pace was a contractor for, I believe it was quite a minute. He talks about all the instances that he was just on the ground, right? Just a regular old guy. Now, this is where Pace spends a lot of time, and truthfully, I don't see a lot of anymore, is really the storytelling and the positioning. And this is, Pace has dozens of stories that somehow spin back into his offer. I don't know how he does it. It's a genuine skill. But seeing him go through this story, the dumb people like self-opt out, right? They don't want to hear it. They're like, I thought we were going to learn the system, whatever. And it's funny because you'll see people that are familiar with Pace, or at least some of the warmer traffic, will defend him and be like, just watch, right? There's a lesson to this. And it's kind of the same as a church, right? Like when you go speak to a preacher, if you go to a church sermon, it's not just them reading off the rules and going over the system or rules of life. It's typically some drawn out story about somebody comes in the problem situation, comes to a conclusion, right? Addresses their false beliefs, overcomes objections, and has this newfound belief. And so for Pace, this was him running his contracting business, right? It was him and a couple other guys. And then one of his subcontractors needed money. And that Pace thought, sure, I'll give you the 6K. But in here, right, Ruben was already kind of familiar in the mix, at least this arbitrage of, earnest money JVing and at least getting interest on lending payments. And Pace talks about how his brain broke when the original Ruben guy paid up the 6K, that he actually wired him 12, and he thought it was a mistake. And the guy was like, Ruben was like, what do you mean, Pace? It's not a mistake, right? That's just what you get. If I went with anybody else, I would have gave them the initial 6K. Pace is like, 6K, I lent you 6K. You're giving me 100% interest. And again, Ruben's like, why do you find this so surprising? This is very normal. And right, for you guys taking notes, right? We're positioning like this newfound belief as something that happens every day, super normal, super common, very average. And so the whole story was about Ruben, with Ruben and Pace, was about how Ruben was so surprised that Pace wasn't familiar with this, and that, wasn't familiar with the interest or even the concept of doing this. And the fact that he could lend money to these people that were very normal and in very normal circumstances and in a super short timeline, right? I think there was about 10 days, he could double his money. And Pace talked about how that was more. He made more in a week doing nothing than he did running his entire contractor business in a month. All these great beliefs broken, and from there we get into the Gator name, right? So Pace is again super good about working in the family angle and the whole, real wholesome stuff. But his wife is where Gator method came from, right? They're taking a chunk out of other people's deals in exchange for lending money. And so at this point, people are like, okay, I get it. I understand people make money on lending and there's interest involved, but like, what is the nuance? How does this actually work? And so Pace talks about like, cool, these are all the mistakes I made doing this. You could probably imagine, right? Like if I tried to do this again, it would never happen again, right? I'm just going to get screwed. Somebody's going to take the money. They're not going to be able to pay me back, right? Like, how does this turn into a business? How does this become more repeatable? And so this is where Pace kind of gets into the actual real estate logistics, right? Like, cool. Like the next day I immediately did research and found out that this was a function within business that happened every single day, right? And that there's dozens of people that are in this painful spot. And that if I just push and position myself right here, especially at this time, that I could do this over and over and over and over and over again. And so at this point, people are like bought in. They're like, all right, I get it. I get the vehicle. But where does the money come from? And so Pace talks about the actual Gator function, which in the order of operations, the core pillars of fulfillment, where he talks about locking up your deal, finding the JVs, and then structuring your assignment fees so that you can make your money. And so math, clear as day, right? All that stuff is highlighted, 100 to 400% returns in just days. And then finally, just a huge montage, right? In a handful of the live instances, we would invite students to either join the live stream remotely. And then towards the end, we actually had when we were doing these live in the New Reach studio, we'd have a room full of students. We have anywhere between 8 to 12 people, right? We'd have the director pan the camera and they're all sitting there waving, right? And one at a time, they would all kind of come up and talk about their story, about how they figured out this was possible and how they discovered Pace and all the things that they went through before and how fun it was to go through Gator and how successful they are now. So as time went on, we just put as much student proof in here as possible. As you can imagine, some of them kind of went off the rails and said stupid things, but towards the end of it, we found like 3 or 4 really core guys that were kind of backbones of being student testimonials, or at least student advisors, call it what you want, to the Gator method. And people would, at the point, like seek them out post joining. Because somebody had that core experience, maybe it was in a town or they were also a single mother, right? Those testimonials we brought in, we made sure that they at least they addressed some sort of common avatar and objection combo, and were at least proof that unique combination can actually make it out and make it through. So from there, typical bonus stacks, right? We wanted to make it seem like that the bonuses alone were worth the admission price. And there's a handful of other bonuses in here, but I know like all of the calculators and stuff were super valuable. It takes a long time for some of these guys to put some of that together. This was 3 years ago. Now with AI, it's probably a little bit quicker, right? Pace's wife was actually a really successful realtor. And so talked about the actual process of like adding, getting more involved with the deal and actually helping sell the deal. But what most people look for was these like attorney approved documents. How do you protect yourselves, get your money back, do all this legally and everything between. Because this was such a like legal intensive money moving hand operation, this was kind of hung a lot of people up. And so the fact that all of this was just pre-approved by Pace's internal attorney, and that you could just come in and put your name on it, put the terms of the deals, and it was all kosher. People really enjoyed that. And that was kind of one of the biggest hurdles going in. So prior to the webinar, we did a lot of alluding to some of the previous offers that Pace launched and how much that they were. These were like more intimate experiences, typically priced at that 10K mark, right? So when we came in, we were finally able to say like, hey, I know you guys saw 10K, right? I know some people actually paid 10K. Here's proof of that, right? But because you're here today, all that fun stuff, 2,900. Limited seats for sure. Definitely at the start, we weren't able to sign everybody. We could only, the cohort can only handle so many people, considering we had limited onboarding reps, or at least people to push people through these deals. But towards the end, it was pretty much uncapped. But of course, limited seats, close in a year, or it's going to close for a year. So Pace was known for kind of closing some of the offers and keeping them closed. He would open something else, but that specific version of Gator would no longer be available. And then your typical call to action wrap. Nothing fancy here. It's just, again, Pace driving the comments. I'll probably, now that I'm talking about it so much, I'll probably end up doing a separate video, or at least kind of doing a recap of the actual webinar itself, showing you guys how he drives the comments so specifically. But it is genuinely taking, and you guys are probably participating in the webinar where there's somebody that like, there's always somebody in the chat that's like dropping really hard hits and hard objections. And there's sometimes people that like the rest of the chat will rally behind that person. And so Pace was really great about figuring out who that was very quickly, just based on the question and the cadence in which they were asking, and making sure that they were highlighted and heard throughout the presentation. Even if, multiple slides after, Marianne said that thing, he kind of go back and be like, Marianne, you still there? Remember when you said this earlier? Like, this was the thing I was talking about. Does this answer your objection? And Marianne would be like, yes, it does. And they'd be like, see, everybody thought that Marianne was right. Everybody thought this. You all thought that. If you still think that, this is the thing, right? And so speaking specifically to them. So that's the webinar outline. Again, drop in the comments if I missed anything here, or you want to see any more information. For the sake of you guys, if you want to screenshot anything, feel free to take this here. Just took Pace's webinar outline and made it a little more template friendly. If this is a webinar cadence you decide to follow, now tread lightly. Pace's expert presenter and speaker. But if you feel like you can really nail in the story component and that actual like aha moment where you figure it out, and there's a whole cycle here, then go nuts. This might work for you. So believe it or not, we did this instance live, I think about 8 to 10 times over the course of about 2 years. And the webinar ran evergreen for upwards of 130 weeks. So I can add some more context later on about, some of the nuances that we changed in the evergreen instance, and, some of the things that evolved throughout media buying and getting further quality there, because we were prospecting pretty deep and spending pretty considerable amount of money towards the end of time here. But you could see actually this testimonial grab was right around there. So in its peak, we were doing $500,000 cash collected every week, 7-day profit, all that fun stuff. So really great ROAS. Something like this may never happen again, or at least a lot of things have to add up where you have the urgency and timeliness in the market, just real estate ecosystem going nuts. You have an insanely prolific speaker. Pace was a true preacher in this and did his job of converting non-believers to believers. And then finally, just a crazy community and just general brand affinity. People bought anything this guy sold. I think even at one point we had a blank sales page and people bought it. So anything we put out made money, and we we try not to take advantage of that, and wanted to make sure that we at least extracted as much as possible while using Pace's good faith to actually make everybody happy. So that was Gator and Gator Elite. All good stuff on this one. This is well, hands down probably one of our most successful offers that we've ran, and looking to find the next Pace, the next person that is really speaks in the way that he does. So either way, that's my video here. Comment below if you guys have any questions. As you could probably tell, I'm not terribly great at doing like self-guided videos. I need like another person on the other side, or at least answering things specifically. And so all of that helps if you want to see more of this. Also in the bio, I'll drop a link for the ability to schedule an audit with me. More than likely, I'm going to try to make those videos actually like part of my content. Because again, I hate making this style of content. I'd rather just actually riff off of something with you and show you some of the core fundamentals that come along with this. So either way, let me know if you guys have any questions, and look out for the next one.